lovely to welcome you to the Farm Air Podcast. Can you tell me about the rather unusual beehives that you have on the farm here and what the background is to them?
Yeah, sure. Well, they're sort of growing in number. We started with one originally, and the idea basically of that apiary site is to sort of take honeybees back to the trees. So that is their sort of ancestral home.
So they're tree hives, not beehives.
We call them tree hives. We've sort of invented that name.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, because we couldn't think of anything more appropriate. But in an ideal world, honeybees in the wild, so free-living bees is the sort of term, they would live in hollow cavities of sort of ancient trees. But because we don't have many ancient trees left in the landscape, we've kind of had to make these simulated cavities by creating hollows in tree trunks. And we've now got a sort of selection down there, including the rocket hive, which literally does look like a sort of rocket
stunning,
with a thatched hat. I mean, the thinking behind it, if you want me to
absolutely,
tell you a
please
bit
do.
more.
Yeah.
So really, I mean, it's very much in keeping with Farm Ed. What we're trying to do is move away from a sort of industrial view of beekeeping or honey beekeeping. As with any sort of commodity, be it an agricultural commodity like, wheat or barley or livestock also suffers from the same kind of intensification, where they're really bees that have come to be, in many instances, just seen as a production unit. So they're just like a sort of factory for making honey. And the problem is, once you start looking at any living organism like that, is you take away from it all its sort of natural instincts and also all its ability to survive under duress. So that could be environmental factors or disease or climate change or all the sorts of things that are being thrown at us now. I mean, the case of honeybees, Varroa destructor, which is this sort of parasitic mite, has really kind of brought into sharp focus what is happening in sort of as a result of man's activity in meddling with the sort of bee population.
So tell me how you go about establishing them. So the hives themselves, there's very beautiful structures, aren't they? Actually, they're lovely.
I think they're beautiful. They're gorgeous. Yeah, I hope the bees like them.
Absolutely. And they were made by Rhys, weren't they? Is that right?
Yeah. So Rhys Davies, who's an amazing wood sculptor and has done a lot at Farm Ed. He and I were working on another project somewhere else, and he was trimming some pollarded willows. And I just looked up and I said, Rhys, if you ever find a hollow tree, this is years ago, I would really love to make a home for bees, to live in the wild. And then sort of fast forward, I don't know, maybe 5 years, he sort of found that tree you were talking about. And then it was like, well, where can we put it? Like neither of us have farms. So, a sort of happy chance meeting with Ian and Celine, and it was like, yeah, this is before Farm Ed opened, and they said, yeah, you can have a corner of our field. So, suddenly this little kind of project had a hive and a tree and a location. And then Rhys has gone on to make another, originally we made some other ones that didn't quite work, so we sort of scrapped those.
Why didn't they work?
It's a very interesting question, actually, and this is part of our learning as well. So bees have a collective thing called the hive mind. And this is still kind of beyond the understanding of science, but it encompasses all sorts of interesting, like intelligence that only bees have. And they have specific requirements in specific environments for their home. So their home is, their choice of home is critical, especially in climates that are variable like ours, and especially when you have long winters. So they are choosing homes where they're going to most likely survive. So it's to do with cavity volume and thermoinsulation. And what I've also come to learn more recently is the texture inside of the space needs to be rough. They don't particularly like a smooth, like plain finish. The reason for that is they like to coat the whole inside with this medicinal tree resin, propolis, which they sort of manufacture from sap, sort of like sticky resins and saps and balsamic unguents that plants produce.
Wow.
Yeah, so they sort of make this absolutely perfect home for themselves, knowing exactly what they need. And in order to do that in the wild, they're more demanding of the cavity than they perhaps would be if a beekeeper just chucks them in a box.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So how do you go about, when you've got your hive, your tree hive, how do you go about colonising that hive? Because obviously with a normal and traditional beehive, you buy in the bees, or you find them and you introduce them to the hive, don't they? How does it work with the wild bees? Do they find it themselves, or do you have to show them where it is, or how does it work?
Well, we've been lucky. I think if you get everything right, the bees come. Because, as I said, there's
just bees that might have been in a hive, or where have they come from?
They could have come from managed colonies.
Yeah.
So from another beekeeper.
Yeah.
There are sort of, contrary to popular opinion, there are many free living colonies, healthy free living colonies. Just local to me where I live, there's one that I visit probably once a week. In a tree. I've been visiting it for the last 10 years. Yeah. So, they exist, these free living colonies, and obviously they outgrow their cavity and then they'll swarm. So we don't know where the bees have come from. Yeah. But they very quickly colonised the tree hives. Although we've got one that hasn't been colonised.
It's waiting for its...
And I think we may have got the design, not to optimal requirements for the honeybees. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So how does it work? So obviously at Honeydale, appropriately named, we have also a traditional apiary with the traditional hives, which is quite a distance from your tree hives. But how does it work on the farm with the wild bees and the domesticated bees living together? How does that work?
Well, the truth is we don't honestly know. I mean, there's no obvious conflict.
Right.
We share, the beauty of working with Paul and Tony is
the bee team.
Together we make the bee team.
Yeah.
The beauty of sharing with them is that they share much of our ethos. So they're very much looking at thermoinsulation when they manage the hives, winter survival, low intervention, and also not taking too much honey from the bees. So they're not doing intensive farming. Yeah. So I think that's important to say.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Otherwise we would be completely at odds.
Yeah.
But the chances are that, there is, how do I say this exactly? Bees don't just operate as a colony, but they operate as a sort of network of colonies. So so the chances are, and for example, the example I'll give you is that the drones, so the male bees, so colonies will produce male bees, not just to satisfy, their own requirements, because in many ways you don't really want your own sons, your own brothers, as it were, to mate with you. No. So the colonies, what they will do is they will produce, excess drones, and then the mating happens in what's called drone congregation areas. So all the colonies are contributing to this genetic biodiversity in the mating process.
That's fascinating, isn't it?
It's really fascinating.
World is just fascinating.
But trees do it too. The communication channels between all these living organisms, I don't think we fully understand. No.
That's amazing. So do you have to manage them at all, or do you just kind of build a hive, the tree hive, they come along and they just get on with it, or do you have to do anything? Yeah, no.
The idea is that we're leaving them alone, and so we can kind of look at them and see, observe them. Yeah. So it's a kind of educational tool, and we do have an African top bar hive down there, which is a sort of semi-managed, like halfway house. That's mainly there for educational purposes, so that we can actually take the top off and show people what wild comb looks like.
And how does it look different? How does it look? That's my next question actually. How does it look and taste different to the traditional hive combs?
The look is so typical managed colonies. The beekeeper introduces wax foundation, and that's embossed with a sort of regular hexagon of uniform size. What you find in wild colonies is the uniformity is not the same, so the cells won't all be identical.
Right.
And also they make a lot more drones, so they make a lot more male bees.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because when you just give bees foundation with this small hexagon, which is the size of a worker bee, for a worker bee, it tends to suppress the drone breeding in the colony. So if you give the bees free rein, they will make whatever they need for the health of the colony.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's a difference. They tend to also do like wind baffles as well. So if you just look at them in a managed colony, it's basically a box with frames and it's kind of regimented in straight lines. But when you look at colonies living in the wild, what I've noticed is they incorporate curves and bends and sort of dead ends. Like it's more labyrinthine.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think it's better defence, not just from wind, but from wasps and mice and all sorts
that would follow, wouldn't it? If they're doing it themselves, they'd be doing it in the way that it's evolved to make it more, give it more longevity than the ones where they're having human intervention and help.
Yeah, and I think when you've got this very regimented box and frames thing, I mean, they do it. They're incredibly adaptable, but I don't think they can exhibit, all their full natural instincts.
Behaviours. And what about the taste of the honey? And I know obviously you don't the honey that you make in the wild hives or the bees make in your wild hives. You don't harvest and you just leave it, don't you? But what have you tasted it? And what if so? How does it differ from traditional?
We haven't taken any from the actual tree hives ever. Right. The access is tricky. I mean, we can if we have to. Yeah. But the idea is that we don't go in at all. Yeah. But from the African top bar, which is the nearest thing, the beauty of that is you can literally take it straight on the comb and share it with groups, and it's warm and eat the comb, and and I mean, perhaps I should also point out that not that this happens at Farm Ed, but in many conventional styles of beekeeping, people are using pesticides. Yeah. Which unfortunately are absorbed into the beeswax because it's a sort of fat lipid, which is like a sponge for toxins. So, there are lots of advantages to just eating wild.
So does it taste nice?
Yeah, but the thing is, it's not always the same taste.
No, because
it
depends
what's flowering.
Pollinating.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
We've got sainfoin here, haven't we? Which that's a particular taste of honey, isn't it?
And you've got the orchard. So that we have like early spring flowers, which is amazing. Yeah. The buckwheat, I'm curious to see what taste that yields. Sunflower honey. Yeah. There's lots of interesting plants being grown here that lend themselves to interesting honey varietals.
Yeah. So what if someone's listening to this and they would think, I'd love to have tree hives on my farm, in my garden. Is that possible for a start? And also, if it is possible, how would they go about? Would they just literally find the right sort of log and leave it there and hope the bees will build it and they'll come? Or what would your advice be?
No, I think really, if you don't know anything. So the Rocket Hive, we bought that from Matt Somerville. Right. Who has a company called Be Kind Hives. And obviously Rhys Davies, made our original one. It requires quite a lot of technical skill to hollow out a log. And also you need to understand the bees as well. Right. So, there are people out there making amazing tree hives or log hives.
So you could go and buy one of those and pop it in your garden if you wanted, and that's all you'd have to do. Yeah. Really amazing.
Yeah, amazing, I know. It's that simple.
That's really lovely, absolutely. And then you just observe them and you just have them in your post of them. That's amazing.
And they bring you the greatest joy.
So tell me what's joyful about them.
Well, I've been working with bees for over 30 years, and honestly, I can't imagine my life without them. They bring you so close to nature, in terms of like your connection with flowering plants, with the weather, with farming, I think, you know, and how we use the land. And also a sense of history. I mean, bees have been around for, I don't know, like, some people say 100 million
honey
years.
In the Egyptian tombs, didn't they?
Oh yeah, but I mean, bees like predate that, you know. So they were there, and the dinosaurs were there. So you know, you've got this connection with the kind of ancient world.
I love that.
Yeah, and also the way they're so social. You know, believe it or not, I see exhibitions of altruism. You know, as do many other beekeepers. You know, they groom each other, they rescue each other. I mean, the intelligence is quite incredible. Yeah,
that's amazing. And so we had to talk about your because the honey that's made in your tree hives, as you said, you just leave, and so the bees just use it for their own food, and as would be in the natural world. But you do have other hives, the traditional hives that you do harvest, and you do something quite interesting with your honey, don't you? You don't do what we'd expect and sell it in jars. You do something else with it.
Well, we do eat it, but I think, you know, people don't realise that honey has this very unique position in sort of health and wellness. So you can take honey for, you know, sore throats. It's amazing as a wound dressing. The NHS actually use it for like ulcers and slow to heal wounds. We, as a family with difficult skin, we've actually used it as a topical thing for skincare products. So we've actually developed a business called Therapy, which sort of translates as healing, loosely as healing through the bee.
Differently than the normal therapy.
With an I, Appy sort of comes from apis bee.
Yeah.
And we've very much kind of gone down the route of using honey as a kind of cure-all for skin problems, and not just problems, you know, it could be sort of dryness or, you know, in my case, I had eczema. So it's like it's a natural healing, moisturising, regenerating ingredient. And we also use propolis as well. So
people can buy that from some sort of...
Yeah, we're doing more direct since COVID. And we also everything's certified organic, so we work with like specialist retailers who have that kind of natural and organic ethos.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. It's been delightful talking about bees. And you can come and see your hives, obviously, on a farm walk, can't you? We show you the hives. And if people want to taste it, I think we do sort of various events, don't we, with honey tasting or what have you.
We do honey tasting, and I think next year we might even do some like more lengthy bee-related kind of courses here.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Thank you very much. Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Bye.
Bye.